funny you say pioneer. I think of Dr. Atkins and the physicians before me as the pioneers. My role was to take these pioneering doctors' information and do research on it. So I suppose I'm a pioneer of the research of low carb diets, and that goes back, gosh, through 1998 was the first time I started to really learn about low carb diets. And, you know, I think I was as worried or concerned about telling people to eat fat as most people were at that time, and still some people are today. So that's number one. I have no concern about people eating fat today. And so, but it was through research of our own and other people, and then just understanding the role of nutrition, that we need fat in the diet. It's filling, we need protein. And so really what I've learned as a doctor who didn't know much about nutrition, most doctors get no training, that protein comes first.
Clearly, in retrospect, I was clearly pre-diabetic. And there's no doubt that had I continued on the way I was, I would have finished up being a fully fledged type 2 diabetic, just like my father. But around that time, a friend of mine in South Africa, Tim Noakes, who was a long-standing friend, we'd shared the platform at many sports medicine conferences and so on. He came out and said he thought that everything we've been taught about diet was wrong, and that it was carbohydrates that were the problems, not fat. And I thought, whoa, Tim, gee, that's a big call. Tim had actually called out a few other myths of sports science over the years, and every time he'd been proven right. And so normally I would just ignore a crazy person, a crazy comment like that was clearly wrong. But because it was Tim, I thought, no, I need to look into this a little bit. So I read a book. I bought a book called Good Calories, Bad Calories by an American author called Gary Taubes. And this book just blew me away. Because not only did it talk about the relative merits of whether we should be eating fats or carbohydrates, but it talked about the politics of how the sort of the low fat movement had won out over the low carb movement 30, 40 years ago, which I'd always assumed was due to, good science and evidence and so on. But it turns out it was due to money and corruption and ego and power and the American agricultural industry.
As a fellow, to me, it's important that I have my health so that I can be first and foremost a very involved member of my community and my family. First and foremost with my family, being a husband and a father is the most important thing to me. And I really want to make sure that I am, if you will, the best provider and protector. That's sort of how I look at my two roles in the family primarily. And I want to be able to work hard so that I'm providing well for my family. And I always want to be, frankly, physically capable that I can protect them in even the most dire of circumstances. But also, even beyond the role that I have now as husband and father, the moment my first child was born, so in other words, the moment I became father, I actually could, in a way, see the day when I would be grandfather. And that's a big part of my motivation. It's not going to be hard for me to be healthy and capable while my kids are still mine at home. But I'm really thinking another decade away when they have children of their own. And I'm imagining the kind of grandpa that I want to be. And so for me, as a man and a member of my family and community, I want to be very capable. And my health matters to more than just my own selfish interests, where I want to go play some sports with my buddies. It's more important to that. A healthy, strong man is not only helpful to himself, but he's a blessing to those around him. And I very much, I take that view to heart, and any sentiment that I can share that helps another fellow feel the same way, and not only feel that way, but also actually take the steps to realize that benefit to him and those around him, I'm happy to do it.
The brain requires real food. Cognitive function requires real food. The body requires real food. The first thing you need to do with your diet is ditch ultra-processed foods. What's an ultra-processed food? It's something that is made in a factory that probably you couldn't make in a kitchen just like this, okay? What you need to eat is meat, fish, fowl, vegetables, and fruit. Ditch the vegetable oils. They are toxic for your body. Ditch sugar. It is terrible for you. It is just a toxic poison. And if you can, ditch grains, because quite frankly, all those bread-based meals are just carbing you up and making you overweight.
They tried to burn the candle at both ends, which, I think a lot of people can relate to. Try to work as hard as I could. But when I was working, I was always working in offices. So when I worked in banking, and then I worked in advertising, and I'd always been in office under sort of harsh artificial light. And because you're sitting down, as many people are in like this kind of stagnant air-conditioned air, I try and cram in exercise before or after work. Again, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. So you think about it, you've got to be in the office at 8:30, which is, pretty cruisy. Some people are in much earlier, and then you're not leaving till it's dark in winter, sort of 6 p.m. or who knows, you might get asked to stay back, and you're staying back till 7, 8, 9. And then you're sort of like, oh, I should exercise because I want to be healthy. And then you go and, drag yourself out for a run or to the gym under more artificial lights. And same thing before work. So you're sort of constantly in this state of rush and trying to squeeze in what you think you should be doing. And that kind of can work for a short period of time. But after a while, you just start to feel kind of burnt out, and you wonder why you're, up early alone in the gym, working out, only to then go and sit on your ass for, 12 hours of the day at work. Yeah, I think before kind of sort of taking a more like get back to nature approach or do things more naturally. Yeah, I was trying to sort of cram exercise in, and then it'd be the same with nutrition. It's like, all right, well, I need to be eating healthy.
One thing that I know health is not, and that is a measurement of sickness. That has really nothing to do with health, in the sense of trying to find a place to be where you are living a life that pushes you away from the tendency to be sick. And so what does that look like? So health is a constellation of characteristics or motivations or principles that somebody lives by. This is how I think about it. Health includes what you put in your mouth, but more about that later. Health also has to do with activity level, being a healthy, active adult. And in our 60s, as a male, this is even more important, because we lose our strength and we lose power a certain percentage every single decade of our life. And if we're inactive, we maximize how much strength and power and balance and so on that we're losing each decade. So part of health is maintaining activity level, and that comes in a lot of different forms. More on that later. My view on health also includes healthy relationships.
So health has changed a lot. So if you look at it from like health policy, it's just become a lot more political. My views on health, they've been pretty much the same. And that comes from my understanding in biochemistry. When you look at nature, you always find fat and protein together, and you always find fiber and sugar together. And so if you're going to consume it, you want to consume it how nature dishes it up. So you want to eat fat and protein, and we actually need that fat. So I'm referring to saturated animal fat. I'm not talking about plant fat. That refined plant fat is it's bad stuff. So that saturated animal fat you require to make the protein work. The amount of fat you consume relative to protein is imperative, because it will determine what your cortisol does. And your cortisol is going to determine whether you evolve, get stronger, and get better, or you basically are just catabolic and slowly treading water but sinking.
My sort of light bulb moment was I was following now what I know is what I call conventional stupidity. I was doing what Einstein said is insanity, which is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. But the issue is I didn't know what I was doing wrong. But I got to a point where it was so terrible that I had to make a change. So I went looking for answers, and I went to an event where a man called Dr. Stephen Finney came to Australia and spoke at the Epworth Hospital for diabetics. And I went to that event, and from that night forward, I totally changed the way I ate. And
I was basically on a pretty bad collision ending where I was heading towards a pretty rough road. Hypertension for 30 years, sleep apnea, severe sleep apnea. I was tested before going on CPAP therapy. I was stopping to breathe 45 times per hour. It really was a severe case of sleep apnea. When I went to see the doctor and I said, I think I have sleep apnea. And when we got the results, he goes, "You think you have sleep apnea? I don't know how you're standing," right? So it was a severe case, hypertension for 30 years, on medication. Even while I was on medication, at the best case scenario was just keeping it at borderline, like 140/90. And that's as good as it got.